What happens to the human being that makes the human being feel romantically linked to baseball?
There's just something aesthetically beautiful about it. And there's something about the flight of the ball in the air against the night sky. There is a thrill to that. I also think on another level that's not as romantic, but which keeps our interest, is that there's always more happening on the field that we don't understand than that when we do understand. There's always more to learn. And I have access to these people every day. But if I can talk to a Garrett Cole or Francisco Lindor, it's about what they do, they're going to say things that I have no idea what they're talking about. And I have to go back and study and learn more. There's so much going on. It's such a complex game that it keeps your intellectual engagement too. And again, there's just a beauty to it. I don't know if you know Jeffrey Loria. About 10 years ago, I, through a mutual friend, was watching a game with him in his seats behind the Marlins dugout at Citi Field, maybe about a decade ago. And it's a similar play. There's a fly ball to left field, but this one was an F7. It died on the track. And he looks over to me and the other person we were with, and with like misty eyes, and just says, "That's a beautiful game, isn't it?" And I thought, boy, if someone in his 70s who's at the top of the business side of this can still feel that way, it must be a pretty profound feeling.
So joining us now on Open Book is Andy Martino. He's an award-winning journalist covering Major League Baseball for over a decade, even though he looks 13 years old. Martino, I got to tell you, you look great. Okay, I need your skincare product regime.
Well, thank you. I'm 43.
All right, well, you're looking great. Okay, you're looking about 13. Okay, so the Yankee way, the untold inside story of the Brian Cashman era. And I consider Brian Cashman a good friend of mine, actually. My wife and I love Brian Cashman. Every time I make my way to the stadium, I try to hang out with him. Full disclosure, I'm also very good friends with Chris Ahmad, who I think you know. Dr. Ahmad has been their doctor for many years. And so I'm a Met fan, but I am a Yankee lover. I am envious. Let me restate that. I'm not a Yankee hater. I do have tremendous amounts of Yankee envy, particularly last night when I'm watching them play. They just got they're still the U.S. Steel of base. Now, for my young listeners, U.S. Steel was one of the greatest corporations in American history in the mid-50s. The Yankees were winning one championship after the next, and they were the U.S. Steel, or maybe they're the Google of baseball today. Pick the greatest company. They're the company. And you have done a brilliant job in this book, by the way, of explaining what the Yankee way is, what the culture is. But before we get there, Andy, I want you to tell us why this love affair with sports and why this love affair with baseball for Andy Martino.
Well, thank you for the compliments. Thank you for having me. That's an interesting question with a lot of depth. I remember being 9 years old, watching the 1989 World Series, that Battle of the Bay A's-Giants that was disrupted by the earthquake. And that was the age where there was something about being allowed to stay up late enough to watch a World Series game, being alone in the living room, taking it in. It's just in that inexplicable way of the things that we're passionate about. It just got in my bones, and I still feel that way. When I was at Yankees-Dodgers last night, and I still felt romantic about it. And then when I was much older, trying to become a writer, I drifted toward this being the only topic that I could write about well. I mean, if I could write about something this effectively about something with a broader audience, whether it's the NFL or politics or what have you, I maybe would. But this is just the thing that I feel like I understand and am passionate about the most. And it's been that way since I was 9 years old, really. In that way, it's sort of mysterious, the things we gravitate to, but it's a strong feeling.
So you said romantic. And if you love baseball, that word resonates. It certainly resonates with a man like me. And so what is it? I can't figure it out myself, but I'm addicted to baseball. If I ever retired, I'd want to go to 100 games. I have it all planned out. It would be 30 different ballparks, 3 games each in each ballpark. And then obviously the last game at Yankee Stadium, the Cathedral of Baseball. But why? What happens to the human being that makes the human being feel romantically linked to baseball?
Well, there's a pastoral aspect that's been talked about a lot, right? And I also think there's just something aesthetically beautiful about it. Judge's home run last night, we're speaking on Monday, last night was Sunday Night Baseball. Judge hits a towering home run in the 8th inning to left field. And there's something about the flight of the ball in the air against the night sky. It's sort of, this would be purple prose if I were to write it down. But since you're asking, there is a thrill to that. I also think on another level that's not as romantic, but which keeps our interest, is that there's always more happening on the field that we don't understand than that when we do understand. There's always more to learn. And I have access to these people every day. But if I can talk to a Garrett Cole or Francisco Lindor or whoever else about what they do, they're going to say things that I have no idea what they're talking about, and I have to go back and study and learn more. There's so much going on. It's such a complex game that it keeps your intellectual engagement too. And again, there's just a beauty to it. I don't know if you know Jeffrey Loria or if you guys have run in the same circles at all. So I was, about 10 years ago, I, through a mutual friend, was watching, you know what a romantic he is about baseball if you know him.
He's the owner of the Marlins.
He was the owner of the Marlins at the time. And I was watching a game with him in his seats behind the Marlins dugout at Citi Field, maybe about a decade ago. And it's a similar play. There's a fly ball to left field, but this one was an F7. It died on the track. And he looks over to me and the other person we were with, and with like misty eyes, and just says, "That's a beautiful game, isn't it?" And I thought, boy, if someone in his 70s who's at the top of the business side of this can still feel that way, it must be a pretty profound feeling.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I'm a diehard fan. I owned a piece of the Mets for many years. I ended up having to sell it to one of my very close friends, Steve Cohen. I went to Citi Field. We almost got no hit, I think, by the Braves a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I was there.
And JD Martinez obviously hit the home run, thank God, and the 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth. But I was in Steve's box with him.
It's quite a box.
Quite a box. Probably the nicest in the majors, actually. And by the way, Steinbrenner's box is very nice, but it's just a different feel from a aesthetic point of view. But my thing about it, I guess, the reason I'm bringing it up in this way is the inside information. Who's feeling what and why. Why the pitcher is pitching off of one part of the rubber versus another part of the rubber, depending on who he's pitching to. The scouting report on the hitters, where the pitcher knows is the weak spot for that hitter. And that weak spot could change depending on if that hitter's streaking or not streaking. And you and I could have a in-depth technical discussion about baseball that could last 6 hours, and it could be related to one inning of the game, positions of the players in the field. Yep. Are you going to hold the runner or are you going to let him steal? All the different things that go into this. And so for me, I have this love affair with baseball, which is why I was gravitated towards your book. I read your book in one sitting.
Oh, wow.
I gave it to my trainer who reached out to you on Twitter, and you were nice enough to.
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
That was my trainer, Ray Solomon. Actually, if I'm being totally with no fake news, I think he was reading it simultaneously to me. I suggested it to him, and then he told me that he reached out to you on Twitter.
He did.
Which gave me the idea to reach out to you on Twitter. Okay. So, let's go to Brian Cashman for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You start out, first page of the book, the story that is always told about the Yankees is wrong. And then you say, well, why don't I try to get it right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what was wrong? You obviously got it right in this book, but let's go to what was wrong first. And then let's talk about the Yankee way.
Yep. Well, that's obviously the kind of statement that sends off alarm bells in a reporter, journalist brain, right? Well, wrong. Well, what's right? What do you think is right? Let's dig into that. And Brian, as you know, since you know him, has great stories and insights that he shares off the record. And certain reporters he's known for a long time are no different. And that's one of the things he would always say. And you always want to learn more about that. And he wasn't always necessarily in the mood to elaborate. But I ultimately got to a straight answer for that in the reporting of this book, which is when he says wrong, he means that he feels like the wrong people have gotten all the credit for all the Yankee success, probably in particular the Yankee dynasty, and that very important people have been left out. Anytime there's a documentary or a telling or what have you about the Yankee dynasty, it's Joe Torre, Derek Jeter, the core four, maybe G. Michael, the legendary GM and scout. And Cashman feels that Michael deserves a lot of credit, but there's a whole group of people that were gone by the time the dynasty really started. Bill Livesey, who was a player development executive and scout who in the 70s and 80s basically invented the Yankee way. And as you said, we'll get into what that is on a more technical level, I'm sure, in a bit. But somebody who really invented the philosophies that the Yankees still go by and built their dynasty on. There was Buck Showalter, who is a known name in baseball, of course, but who was the manager that got them right to the doorstep. He was gone after the 1995 season. And there were a few others who Cashman just believes don't get enough credit when a few people came in when they were ready to win and enjoyed the fruits of it. One of the most surprising things that Cashman said to me in our many interviews for this book was when he said, the beginning of the end of the Yankee dynasty came in the year 1995, which is a pretty surprising year to choose when you think they hadn't won their first championship of that run yet. But his point was the people that I mentioned were all fired, demoted, sent elsewhere or whatever on George Steinbrenner's whims by the 96 championship. And they weren't able to enjoy what they had built firsthand. And the Cashman, at that point, he knew it was only a matter of time until things weren't as good with the Yankee dynasty because the people who built it, the talent who built it, in the front office, the scouts, managers, coaches, were gone. So that's what he meant by wrong. That story is never acknowledged.
Okay, well, you're fairly in depth about it. And so let me start with this. George Steinbrenner, the very famous owner of the Yankees, is banned from baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Did that help or hurt the Yankees and the Yankee way?
It certainly helped. And this is probably the part of the story that's been told prior to my book coming out, in that Gene Michael was then able to hold on to players like Bernie Williams, Andy Pettitte, Mariano Rivera, who Steinbrenner likely would have traded, and in fact tried to get Bernie Williams traded many times. And the Yankees had the chance to do baseball operations. George Steinbrenner was a great recruiter. He was a great closer of deals. He's obviously not without his attributes that helped them win championships. But if you look at Yankee myth versus Yankee reality, he's reputed to have built the 70s dynasty, saved it from the CBS ownership. But a look at how those rosters were built show that he inherited Greg Nettles, Ron Guidry, Thurman Munson. And to his credit, he recruited Reggie Jackson, a catfish hunter, to finish it off. That's fine. In the 90s, he's suspended. Again, baseball ops can do his thing. They can hold on to the prospects that Gene Michael and his people believe are worth holding on to. And then Steinbrenner comes back. And maybe he did have a quality where he could put his foot on the gas where it was time to win now. And that was what he contributed tonally in the organization. But frankly, the Yankees built both of those winning eras under Steinbrenner's watch when he was not there, be it suspension or that he hadn't arrived on the scene yet.
Okay, so I have a theory that I want to test on you, and
Sure.
I want you to react to it. This is just my observation of being a professional sports league fan for 55 of the 60 years that I've been on the planet. A good sports owner lets the operations people run the sports team. Okay, Bob Kraft is an example of that. Okay, anywhere where Lou Lamoriello went, who was a phenomenal GM of hockey, you let him run the team, he'll get you to the playoffs and probably build you a Stanley Cup. Owners that get involved in the process, okay, that would include some of our New York owners, which I won't name any of them because I like going into these places. I don't need my face recognized.
Sweet, I understand.
Okay, and so you've got the meddling owners.
Yeah.
Okay, and so the question then is, am I right about that?
I think it's an excellent point. I think, obviously these management dynamics are somewhat situational, and that Steve Cohen, who we both know, is smart enough to be asking some of the right questions of his people and probably contributing in a positive way. But with David Stearns in place and Scott Havens in business ops, less public, Steve is taking a step back from micromanaging. So,
well, I mean, look, I'm close to Steve, and I would say this to you, my observation, that he's totally like that. And maybe he wasn't like that day one.
Right.
He's trying to find the right people. He's got the right people now.
That's right.
And his attitude is, you got this. I'm going to watch the team. You need my advice or help, I'll help you, but you got to run it the same way he let somebody run a P&L inside of his organization, .72.
I agree with you. I've seen that happen too, as he now feels like he has the right people in place. And that supports your theory that micromanaging from an ownership level is not the way. But like I said, with Steve, he has things he can contribute because he's such a quick study. George Steinbrenner had that recruiting and charm that he can contribute. But by and large, I completely agree with you. And that's something that's forgotten about George Steinbrenner, as he's been sort of deified late in life. The Yankees had a lot of success. And Hal Steinbrenner, I was surprised by this quote, told me in his book interview here, people forget that my father was not well liked at all in the 80s, like at all. And that micromanaging was clearly the reason why. I mean, there's so many different examples of things that just wouldn't fly today in New York baseball. It's 1 a.m. in the press room at Yankee Stadium in 1980, whatever. And Gene Michael's the manager, and George walks in and says, no, he's not. Sticks a scout. Clyde King is the manager. Billy Martin's going to the broadcast booth. And, a month later, it was something different. It was just chaos because he was emotional about the result of a game. And he did that for decades, and that wasn't a positive for the Yankees. And I say that having not been there for a good chunk of it, because everyone I talked to who was there felt that it was a negative and not a positive toward Yankee success. And it went all the way into Cashman finally took over full control of baseball ops after the 2005 season. And a year prior to that, he had Vladimir Guerrero signed, who could have gone in the Hall of Fame in a Yankee hat. And George Steinbrenner said, oh, no, I met with Gary Sheffield in Tampa. We're doing Chef instead. It's like, when Sheffield was a great player himself, but, that's no way to run a business probably. So I do agree with you that those were not the best qualities of his stewardship of the team. And the executives that succeeded, like Gene Michael and Cashman, had to overcome that.
Okay, so Cashman's got this interesting story. You point out in the book he serves as a bat boy to the Dodgers. He lost money gambling. His father becomes friends with Steinbrenner. Tell us the rest of the story.
That's right. So John Cashman, Brian's father, is a Hall of Famer in the harness racing world. He was a really big deal there, and he dealt with George Steinbrenner in that capacity. So that's how Brian was able to get in the door. He did lose money gambling down at one of a track that John Cashman and Steinbrenner both were involved in South Florida. And he needs to borrow money from the PR guy at the track, who says, hey, I can get you an internship with the Yankees, because Cashman was a college baseball player at the time. So that is how he got in. And as soon as he was in the door, Brian Sabian, who himself was probably a future Hall of Fame executive, went to the Giants, won 3 championships. At the time was a Yankees executive, said Cashman was a person from means. You knew that, but he didn't act like that. He was a look, listen, speak intern. And he took it all in, and he was quiet and as inscrutable as he can be today. You know him, he can be very fun, but he can also be very, very guarded and observant. And from all accounts, he brought that into, as a 19-year-old, he brought that into the Yankee offices and impressed them. And George Steinbrenner, for all his micromanagement, clearly saw in Cashman, as he saw in Gene Michael, that of all the people that he hired and fired, those 2 were keepers. There was something about those guys, and he let them push back, and he let them argue, and he didn't do that with everybody. And Cashman did impress not only the boss, but other baseball ops executives pretty much from the moment he walked in the door.
I mean, he's a tremendous guy, and he's a total professional. Explain how a guy can work 25 years in the Yankee organization with the Steinbrenners, and obviously George Steinbrenner dying in 2010, 14 short years ago. How did he not get fired over that period of time?
Well, it's a great question, or not quit, which he almost did a number of times. How do you survive, period? And I think part of it is what I just said, in that George Steinbrenner and now Hal must have that instinct for, boy, this guy, I mean, they've had a winning record every year for 30 years. You better, if you're going to blow that up, you better be really careful about that. And so it's the success. It's a results business, and they have been posting results year in and year out, even if their fans want another championship sooner. They've had a winning record for literally more than 3 decades straight. So that's a highlight of why he's been able to stay. But also he's agile. He doesn't really have, like, intellectually agile. He goes with the times. He's always recalibrating. You know, what is the industry doing? What do I want of that? What do I don't like of that? It's a very dynamic process where there are executives where you can point to and say, this is his philosophy. And he doesn't really have that so much, as he's always intellectually curious about where things are going, and he's always current. And that helps. And he's also just tough. He's got a thick skin. I asked Brian why he wanted the job when they originally offered it to him. He's 30 years old in 1998, early 98. Bob Watson, the veteran, respected, championship-winning GM, at that point, is hiding in his office every day, watching soap operas, ordering takeout, because every time he'd pick up the phone or walk out into the hallway, George is probably screaming at him. And he quits. He can't take it anymore. And, like, why would Cashman want that? Why in the world would you want to replace that guy? And he just sort of shrugged when I asked him that, and he said, I just figured I was raised in this environment. I was uniquely equipped to handle it. And he's right about that. The Steinbrenners value him for the reasons I stated, but he also can handle it. And he the loyalty goes both ways there.
Well, I love him. I think he's one of the consummate professionals in Major League Baseball. You gave him up a little bit, though, Mr. Martino. You told us he has a burner account, got a Twitter burner account to check in on the fans. Do you think some of the fan criticism bothers him, or he's just using that burner account for a barometric pressure reading?
Did you see, I'm sure you're aware of the GM meetings last year when he kind of unloaded and dropped some F-bombs and defended his people and his process.
Yeah, of course.
I knew that was building up for some time because naturally, I think if you're someone who thinks you do a pretty good job, the objective facts support that you do a pretty good job, and everyone's telling you suck all the time. He has a thick skin, but that would be annoying after a while. You know, at 2022 ALCS, they're in the Final Four. They got swept by the Astros. It was ugly, but they're there, and it's like fire Cashman. At that point, it must have bothered him, although he would be loath to really open up about that. But I do know that he doesn't look at the burner account anymore. There's a TV. I'm sure you've been in his office if you hung out with him at the stadium. There's a TV on the wall. If you went in there a couple years ago, it was MLB Network, yes, SNY. Now it's like CNN or whatever. He's trying to do his job now while tuning out the noise more intentionally than he did even a few years ago. So sure. I mean, look, I'm a pretty good reporter, and people tell me on Twitter all day that I suck, and I'm fine, but it's annoying. So I'm sure he had the same experience.
Well, I mean, I'm going to give you a lesson from politics, Martino.
Please do.
Shut off your Twitter notifications.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And tweet and read all the other things out there on Twitter except for the responses to your tweet. How about that? Okay.
That's a good call.
I never read that stuff. Get in the habit of doing that. And because, look, what your grandmother told you is correct. What other people think of you, Martino, is none of your business. Okay.
Right.
So just forget it. Put it by the wayside.
That's a good. Right, Cashman has learned that over the years. And I would say that's helped him surviving the job after he thought about leaving after 22, the time I just mentioned, and he re-signed out of loyalty to the family. Judge is a free agent. You're not going to leave Hal in the lurch to deal with that without a GM. There's a lot of reasons, but part of that time started with
let's made this great acquisition of Soto. Hopefully the team can keep Soto in place. What a great 1-2 combination. Had a falling out with Joe Torre. Did they patch it up?
I mean, they say the right things, but and they're not at war with each other or anything. And Torre and his role with MLB for years, he and Cashman dealt with one another professionally. But it feels like a divorce there, where the two people were quite close in the 90s. Cashman said Torre was like a second father to me, and disconnects arose over the years. They drifted apart. There were some conflicts. There was a falling out that was literally over the situation I describe at length in the book. Would be tough to summarize, but had to do with the trust that Cashman felt that he lost in Torre and Ron Guidry, the pitching coach at the time, over the pitch counts that they were reporting, pitchers in spring training. And Torre felt like he was being spied on, and they had a blow up and a falling out. And sure, they patched it up, but it seems to me more like a divorce where you're civil years later than like a deep relationship at this point.
All right. Listen, I like both of those men a great deal. I have a lot of respect for Joe. I had Verducci and Joe. Of course, Verducci wrote the Cubs way. So we now have the Yankee way, the Cardinals way. But Verducci, I had him interview Joe Torre and Bobby Valentine on the 20th anniversary of 9/11.
That's great.
Discussed the rebirth of New York baseball at that very critical time in New York and that tragic time. Okay, so let's go to Jeter and A-Rod and managing both of them. How bad was that? And by the way, I have heard from several Yankees that will remain nameless here who believe firmly that A-Rod cost them more than one championship during the A-Rod era. Do you believe that to be true?
Well, that's a tough thing to quantify, but if players believe that, I wouldn't told that specific thing, but I think that the dynamic was a big part of why they were really good teams in the regular season that just weren't quite winning teams, and certainly not in October through that decade of the 2000s. It was really difficult for their teammates to be around those two sometimes in the Cold War between them.
So tell me about that. Do you think that Cold War lives on the Fox broadcast?
I tell you, Yankee people are fascinated by the fact that they're colleagues now on Fox. It's almost funny to them. And what's interesting to them about it is the first time that Jeter has come in on a team that Alex already had, and how that changes the power dynamic. I think that they've both matured to some extent. Jeter has made peace with Cashman, as you read in the book.
Yep.
And I think he's older now. He's been more reflective. He has a family. So I'm sure it's fine now. But back in the 2000s, there was a lot of tension surrounding that dynamic from a lot of different angles. There was Cashman telling Jeter, you need to be the captain of everyone. You need to make Alex feel more welcome. That being a bridge too far for Jeter. Teammates feeling that tension. There were teammates that were fiercely loyal to Jeter's leadership style. Others that, frankly, by that time felt they didn't know him, that there was a bit of a class system in the clubhouse. If you'd won with us in the 90s, or if you hadn't, Cashman would again say, you're everyone's captain. You have to be inclusive to everyone.
Yeah.
And that would become a building tension between those two. Some people thought Alex was a phony. Some people thought he was a mentor. It was a lot for everybody. And it's hard to find agreement on this whole thing.
Well, since you're a baseball aficionado, there's a foul ball, Yankees versus the Red Sox. The third baseman is meandering, but the shortstop and the captain of the team is running full blast into the stands. So the third baseman closer to the ball, meandering. The captain jumps into the stands, fractures his cheekbone to catch the ball. Do you remember that play?
Oh, I sure do. It's an iconic Jeter moment. I haven't really thought about it from the third baseman being closer angle. It's a good point.
It was closer, but he wasn't moving. He wasn't moving on the ball.
Do you think maybe he was being a good teammate and trying to give Jeter his iconic moment? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, you think so? Yeah, no, I think he's focused on Alex. I think that's the problem, and I think that I think Alex has matured a lot since then, though. I'm not saying that he hasn't, and I want them to get along. God bless. It's just curious that, it's interesting. You can have the stats, but if you're not a great teammate, particularly at that time, it could be costly to the team.
And you still get 100%, and you still get people who were there, sources that I had for the book that were there at that time, who were on Team A-Rod and Team Jeter, and very different perspectives over who was the me guy, who was the team guy. A-Rod's the one at 8:30 in the morning in spring training getting young party animal Robinson Cano out to take grounders. Taught him some discipline and helped him. But then there's the situation you just mentioned. Then there's as many flubs and public ridiculous things that A-Rod got involved in. So two complex people. You needed a book length to really dig into it. I'll tell you that.
Do you remember what Steve Phillips, the former GM of the New York Mets, said about A-Rod?
Well, he said it would be 24 plus 1, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be a team of 24 plus 1.
That's right.
Therefore, he wasn't interested in signing A-Rod. Do you think it was a team of 24 plus 1 during A-Rod's tenure with the Yankees?
The way it was described to me by players there was that it was less that, but more just completely fragmented. Like the media would be in the clubhouse post game, and the second we left, Jeter would go this way, A-Rod would go this way, Giambi would go this way, Matsui would go this way, and there wasn't camaraderie at that time. And so it was almost like 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 with all that A-Rod drama and A-Rod/Jeter drama kind of hanging over everyone also. But it just wasn't a cohesive group by that time, 03, 04, and after.
So I've read The Yankee Way. I'm going to read it again, actually, because I thought it was that good.
Well, that's nice.
And now that I've read The Yankee Way, I'm the GM of the Yankees. Do I sign Juan Soto, Andy Martino?
I think you have to. I think that...
And what is... Okay, so now you're my career counselor. You're my life coach. I'm the Yankee GM. Mr. Andy Martino, what do I got to pay Juan Soto to stay with the Yankees?
Well, Ohtani got like a fake $700 million, right? Where it was all deferred and not real however you call it. I'm a writer. You're a money person more so than I
Yeah.
am. Present day value. Is that the term? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you probably have to get closer to that number in present day dollars with Scott Boras. His agent doesn't do a lot of that deferral kind of stuff. I'm not saying you have to get 7, but you're certainly well over 550 in the 6 range. But this is a player with his age.
So we're talking 8 years, 550.
I think you'd have to go, and you remember how teams like to stretch out deals now to get around the average annual value for the CBT, the luxury tax. So I think you could be looking at something like in the 10 to 15 year range to lower the annual value I haven't done the AAV on a calculator yet with this, but if you're talking 650, something in that range at the 10 to 15 year range, something where that's where the conversation would start.
So he's paid $70 million a year for his active play, but he gets it spread out over that period of time. Otani like to lower the
right without deferral,
value,
but with a longer term.
Okay.
Scott Boras did that with Xander Bogaerts and Bryce Harper, 2 of his clients. So it would be something like that. But his skill set is the Yankee way. It's the long at bat. It's the on base percentage. The only thing he doesn't have is the defense, and that's why he's Aaron Judge is more of an ideal Yankee way right fielder with the arm and better range. But Soto's clearly we've seen is a franchise changing player.
Yeah,
there's a lot of hope among them.
He's working on it, though. He's working on it. He's got a good arm. He's working on it. I think the thing about Soto that I love, he can play in New York.
100%.
Okay, he's ready to play in New York. Some of these guys show up in New York, they get a little nervous. They choke in New York. Not this guy.
Nope.
This guy can smash the ball, and he's got the right attitude for the Yankees. I hope they re-sign him.
Well, let me ask you a question then, because you know Steve. I know Steve, so people ask me this, and I cover him. Hal's got to re-sign him. That's just the way it is from a Yankee perspective. But Steve has more resources. Do you think that he'll be as aggressive as? I'm asking your opinion, not your knowledge, but the guy. Do you think he'll give?
I never want to speak for Steve, but I will say this. Okay, Aaron Judge was a Yankee.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, to sign Aaron Judge without letting the Yankees have. In other words, if the Yankees said, "Look, we're going to pay Aaron Judge $1 million a year for 10 years. Here's your contract. 10 years, $10 million. It's a different story. I think if Steve came in there and said, okay, he made this, I'm going to give him 10 more than that, for each year of the contract, I don't think Steve wanted to be that guy. It doesn't represent who Steve is. Okay.
100%.
Steve is, he's a fan. He's a lover of the city of New York. And Steve wants to bring happiness to this city, at least the portion of the city, and frankly, all the city. I think after 9/11, if you're a true baseball fan in this city, you may root for one of the 2 teams, but I don't know many people now after 9/11 that roots against the other team. I don't.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I made a promise to myself after 9/11, I will never root against a New York team unless it happens to be playing my New York team. Other than that, I root for these teams. It's part of being in the spirit of New York. I think Steve represents that. So you'd have to be in a ballpark zone which is away from the market, and which means that the Yankees really don't want to sign the guy. I don't think he wants to be in that fist fight with the Yankees. It's not in his long-term plans as he perceives himself and how he actually is. He's a great fan owner, if you will. The reason why the Met fans are going to stay with Steve Cohen, he wants to win as badly as they do. And this poor guy, okay, I can verify this because I text with him almost every day. This poor guy watches every inning. And you know what sorry sap watches every inning of a Met game, Martino? That would be me. Okay? And so
you and Steve Cohen.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's therapy. Although yesterday we had a good ending. Okay, so let's go to the last part of this. But before I get there, Judge and Cashman are okay now?
Pretty much. Cashman does not feel that it's his job to have friendly relationships with the players. And he and Judge did get a little jammed up with each other in sideways in the negotiation. And Judge was open about being upset that Cashman announced the Yankee offer publicly. They have a productive relationship. Judge has a really strong relationship with Hal Steinbrenner and is an important voice. I want to say in the front office almost. He's really listened to. he and Cashman aren't really doing like family vacations together or anything, but I'd say it's professional and respectful. And Aaron's a great leader too. So
Hey, let
Cashman
me tell you,
appreciates
I
that.
have never met Aaron Judge. He is my kind of guy.
Yeah.
Derek Jeter, I obviously know well. Okay. I'm down to the 5 famous words for my podcast. I'm going to say the word. You're going to react. You can give me a minute, a second, a word, a paragraph. You ready?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I say the word baseball. You say what?
Writing. Because that's what I do, and that's what I love most about it.
Amen. I think Stratomatic. Is that weird to me? Stratomatic.
No,
you know
it shows your depth of knowledge of the details of the game. How about that?
Yeah, I've been playing Stratomatic since 1971.
And you saw that's where Gene Michael learned on base percentage. His value of on base percentage was through playing Stratomatic.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm bringing it up. So Hal Richmond and his son are friends of mine, Adam Richmond. You're looking at somebody that owns a piece of Stratomatic baseball. That would be me.
How about that? That's cool.
I bought into it during the financial crisis. Wanted to keep that sucker going. Okay.
That's cool.
Okay. Astros.
Cheaters.
So there's really no Astro way, right?
Well, there was one.
The Astro way by Bernie Madoff and Sam Bankman-Fried, right?
It's one of those kind of scandals, 100%. And it's more far-reaching than people realize. They were cheating in 19 as well, not just 17.
Okay, they still cheating?
No, different administration. No, they're not still cheating.
I mean, hurt Carlos Beltran, no?
Oh, it certainly did, and he is a great person. I'm glad for his sake and for the Mets that he's back in the Mets fold in the front office. But that was a hard one for him because he was unfairly cast as the ringleader when in fact he was not.
Yeah, well, I mean that's what happens. You know, when you're next to the dogs that have the fleas, you get fleas. Okay,
that's how it happened.
I'm gonna say the word Mets. You say what?
Carlos Mendoza. They have in place a manager who has the chance to be a great leader of men, an Alex Cora type in-game manager. They hired the right person to lead that clubhouse and establish a culture that when they have the right players, that's going to be a perennial manager of the year type guy. So that's like what's top of mind for what's good about them right now for me.
Okay, and you know Mendoza from your time at the Yankees, obviously,
yes.
right?
And he is great. Stearns and Cohen picked a great one there. They really did. So I like that about them.
Okay, so when I hear Mets, I hear aspirational. I think the Mets, if just no offense to the Wilpons, I like the Wilpons, got along with them really well. Love Fred, love Jeff Wilpon, obviously very close to Saul Katz, all Long Island people. But it was hard to see them winning a championship in that current configuration. I now think, let me just scare you for a second because you are a romantic baseball person. I am 60.
Mm-hmm.
If the Mets have a drought similar to 86 to 2024, I'm not going to see a championship. I will be 98 before a championship shows up, right? There was some poor son of a bitch, age 60, that saw the Mets win in 1986 and said, oh man, I'm going to see at least one more championship. And unless he's in that wheelchair at Normandy with Joe Biden, he didn't make it. You follow what I'm saying?
I do.
All right, I'm just telling you, I'm worried about this, but not that worried now that I got my friend Steve Cohen in place.
I think the future is brighter than the past. I agree with you.
Yeah, amen. Okay, so now I'm going to say the word Yankees. You say what?
Success. In a way. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just saying, in a way more than people realize because of, as we talked about earlier in the conversation, the 3 decades straight of winning seasons, the number of championships, and they are hungry for more as much as their fans are, Cashman is. But it's just, if you watch the game as closely as we do, it's just staggering to watch a team in the race and have a winning record every single year. That's success.
No, it pains me to say this. The Mets are like therapy for misery. You go through a miserable experience and you got to see if your body and mind can live through it.
Yeah.
The Yankees, I see a culture of excellence. And someday we're going to say that about the Mets.
Mm-hmm.
It's there now. We just can't see it yet. It takes 3 or 4 years to brew.
I agree.
I say the 2 words, Brian Cashman, and you get the final word, Andy Martino.
Inscrutable. And that was my challenge. He is a difficult to read guy, even for those who know him. He holds it close to the vest. And Even now, if I called him right now and said, hey, what are you guys doing at the trade deadline? He'd go, I don't know, but he wouldn't say, or something like that. He's a tough nut to crack. And that was why I chose, one of the many reasons why I chose him as a subject. He is very good at being an inscrutable guy. I could have said success again, but I went with, we've given him a lot of compliments, so I went in a different direction.
Yeah, no, he's the man. He's a good dude. I like Brian a lot. What's next for you, Andy Martino?
Well, we've got I work at SNY here, where I'm in the office down at 4 World Trade. We've got a show tonight, and then it's just covering the game day in and day out. Going to find another book topic before long, but it's a beautiful game. I'm lucky to be around it every day.
God bless. It's a phenomenal book. The title of the book should be read by Yankee fans, baseball fans, business owners, entrepreneurs. This is a book for everyone that's interested in excellence. The title, The Yankee Way, and the subtitle is The Untold Inside Story of the Brian Cashman Era, which has been an era filled with great success for the Yankees. Feels like a very good year for them this year, Andy. Congratulations on the book. I wish you great success.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Anthony. I really appreciate it.
If you have money, if you've got power and you can deploy a lot of capital, you can get what you need out of politics. For most Americans, not at all. And people know it. We want to fix it. It's going to take a heavy lift. We got to amend the Constitution. It's basically a battle of power. Can the American people win this fight? And I think we can.
The Congress has a 14% approval rating when they polled. This is slightly above Kim Jong, the North Korean dictator. We're just slightly above. But people hate the Congress. Yet, if you're an incumbent in the Congress, you have a 95% incumbency success rate. So square that circle for me. It's about the money, basically. So go ahead, square the circle for me.
Yeah. Even good people going into the system who want to do good things in Congress are stymied because we have a structural, systemic problem of the power of money to prevent the delivery of what the American people are looking for from our Congress. So you have exactly that problem. You wonder what the 14% are thinking, because most Americans are not getting what we would expect out of our representative government in Congress. And yet, because it's a battle of money and both parties are using super PACs and dark money channels, you're even getting foreign money now coming in to elections, there is a great power to be reelected. And the further up you go, the more control over the money you get in terms of seniority and committee assignments and things like that. The money just completely has corrupted this process. And that's the big divide. What Americans see in terms of how the Congress is performing, and yet what happens on election day.
Welcome to Open Book. I am your host, Anthony Scaramucci. Joining me now is Jeff Clement. He's the CEO of American Promise. He is also a huge proponent in repealing something that's near and dear to my heart. He's an author of a book about it and several articles about Citizens United, which we're going to get into in a second, Jeff. But it's great to have you here. Let's start with your journey. You've been a lawyer, an advocate, and now you lead American Promise. Why is campaign finance reform the fight that you've decided to get yourself into?
Well, Anthony, I think, and thanks for having me on. It's good to see you. I, like a lot of Americans, have watched what's happened to our country and how the money is poured into our political system in these last 15 years. I had something of a front row seat as a lawyer. When I practiced law in Boston a long time, I did a brief in the Supreme Court in the Citizens United case, which struck down the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act back in 2010. I did not think that was going to end well. I was still practicing law, though. So I went out to Montana. Steve Bullock's the Attorney General at the time. He's trying to defend laws that the states have had on the books for a long time to prevent unlimited spending in their elections, all the money coming out. What we now see is the dark money super PAC problem. We win in Montana. The Supreme Court strikes that down. So it seemed to me that we as citizens, as Americans, had to get a handle on the money and politics problem if we're going to be able to solve any other problem. And I think that's what we're seeing now. And the issue, though, is constitutional. The Supreme Court says we're not allowed to solve it. Most Americans actually know we have to, but to do that, we need a constitutional amendment. So that's the journey that brought me to campaign finance. I was not a campaign finance wonk. I was a lawyer representing big companies in Boston. I was serving in the Attorney General's office. But like a lot of Americans, I saw the problem of money in politics, how it was tearing us apart as a country, how it was preventing us from solving some big problems, and how it was increasingly leading to a systemic corruption of our system. And I felt like I could do something to help.
There's a lot of people that listen into this podcast, many from outside the United States, that don't understand the nuances of everything that we're talking about. So I want to set the course for this. And I want to talk a little bit about campaign finance. And so basically in January of 2010, Justice Scalia said in the Citizens United case, and I'm paraphrasing, if you have money, it's your First Amendment right to use it as you see fit. You have limitations in direct campaign donations, but you have no limitations if you want to set up a political action committee to support a candidate or to present an idea or to support or fund a policy. Do I have that right, Jeff, or do I have something wrong about what I'm saying?
No, you have it exactly right, Anthony. And I think it's interesting to look at, like, why did we get that system? We just had a $20 billion election in 2024, $20 billion. We have had a $100 million Supreme Court election in Wisconsin. We have super PACs and local council races now. So we have this system exactly because of what you said, which is the Supreme Court essentially made up a rule about the First Amendment, that there's a free speech right to spend money unlimited as long as you're not doing it directly to the campaigns and you're doing it in these so-called independent, what we now call super PACs ways. No American ever voted for that system. This was not a choice of the American people about how we should fund our elections. For 200 years, the First Amendment had nothing to do with money in politics, and we had anti-corruption laws. The states had them, federal government had them. The mid-1970s, the Supreme Court, case called Buckley versus Vallejo, essentially made up this theory that you described pretty well, which is First Amendment, free speech, unlimited money in elections if you've got the money. So we've been on this sort of several decade pathway to where we are now because of a doctrine that was invented by the lawyers and the Supreme Court that is just failing. It's not protecting free speech of Americans for the most part. It's corrupting the system, and the vast majority of Americans across the political spectrum want to fix it.
Okay, but tell us why they want to fix it, because when I look at the data since January of 2010, the legislative agenda has been wildly skewed towards big business, big food, big pharma, tax cuts for the rich, corporate welfare. Hello, Mr. Politician, let me light you up with PAC money and lobbying and donor money. That was the book, The Wolves of K Street, okay, that I was referencing. And then what happens is they do exactly what those people want. And the little guy in the big, beautiful spending bill, the little guy got torched and the big guy benefited. So am I right about that, or am I wrong about that, sir? And if I'm right about that, what can we do about it?
Well, you're absolutely right about it. And it's not just, you or me saying this. You can talk to virtually any American, ask them. This hits home. This is not like the old 1990s McCain-Feingold campaign finance is a big bore. This is hitting people where they live. And, the reducing money in politics is now the number one priority, according to Pew research. The Americans ranked it ahead of the economy and terrorism after the 2024 election. And the reason is not because, everybody's sort of wonking out on policy. It's because of exactly what you're saying, which is Americans understand most people are not represented in the system. If you have money, if you've got power and can deploy a lot of capital, you can get what you need out of politics. For most Americans, not at all. And people know it. That's why we're seeing the support we're seeing for how we can fix it. And, the beauty of it, Anthony, you've talked about constitutional amendments before. That is a power that the American people have. We want to fix it. It's going to take a heavy lift. We got to amend the Constitution, and it's basically a battle of power of, can the American people win this fight? And I think we can.
All right, so take us through the process, though, of amending the Constitution. I, like you, am an entrepreneur, and I believe we can do things like this, but cynics would say it's pretty hard to amend the Constitution. And don't give Donald Trump any ideas about amending the Constitution so he can run for a third term. But go ahead, do your best to split that baby. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we set out when we launched American Promise in 2016 to prove the cynics wrong, because I and many others had seen all over the country Americans actually weren't that cynical about this. Very cynical about the political process for good reason, but in terms of our own power to actually do something about it, I think Americans have been looking for this kind of opportunity to do something big, because we know the small solutions aren't going to work. So how do you amend the Constitution? We've done it 27 times, starting with the Bill of Rights. Over and over again, we've done this. You need a 2/3 vote in Congress. You need ratification in 38 state legislatures. Now, people will ask, the government can't even fund itself today. How's Congress ever going to vote 2/3? Well, it turns out the secret is always the same. Since the Bill of Rights, all the way to women voting, to the amendments we did in 1971 to lower the voting age, it's always happened the same way, which is you go to the people in the states. The states start passing formal measures to get behind the amendment. That builds the pressure on Congress. It builds the political reality that if you want to get elected to Congress, you better support this kind of a constitutional change. That's what we've been doing. And so we now have 23 states that have formally passed measures saying we want a constitutional amendment to put power back in the hands of Americans, to limit the power of money in the political system and get our voice back. And now the support is building in Congress. We've got hundreds of members of Congress now on board. We've had just brought in a whole bunch of supporters, including state legislatures from the Republican side, to Congress to talk to their Republican colleagues about getting behind this and leading this. And so we are proving every day, and we invite all Americans. We don't care who you vote for. We don't care what your party is. You want to join this fight, we're going to get it done.
You talk about, you wrote a great piece in the Boston Globe where you're drawing a parallel between the American Revolution 250 years ago and today's finance crisis. You're saying basically this is a second revolution moment. What do you mean by that?
Well, it'll be 250 years next July 4th since our revolution began. And it's a continuous theme in American life. In fact, in human life, democracies are rare. Self-government and freedom is rare. It always tends to collapse into concentrated economic power. And the founders, the framers of our Constitution knew that. That was the struggle against, a monarchy, aristocracy. And we had a chance, and we've made a very good run of it, to prove that human beings can actually be free people governing ourselves and get closer and closer to that promise. That's why we're called American Promise of freedom and equality for everybody. But the stakes are high now, and we should just be really clear about that. We could lose this thing if we're not deadly serious about what's going on. And the biggest thing is that concentrated economic power. It's getting more and more concentrated. You have hundreds of millions of dollars from individual donors now. And if we don't work to get our government back to the government of the people, we will lose it. So that's what I mean, is that it's big stakes. It's a big opportunity, though. The framers gave us this tool of constitutional amendment. It's how we've always used it, and it's never been easy. It wasn't easy for women to get the right to vote. It wasn't easy when the American people demanded to elect senators. And so, the Bill of Rights wasn't something that was handed to us. The American people demanded it and amended the Constitution. So it's how we've done it, and I think it's time to do it again.
The Congress has a 14% approval rating when they polled. This is slightly above Kim Il-jung, the North Korean dictator. We're just slightly above. But people hate the Congress. Yet, if you're an incumbent in the Congress, you have a 95% incumbency success rate. So square that circle for me. It's about the money, basically. So go ahead, square the circle for me.
Yeah. It's statistically true. Now, there's always exceptions. People will say, "Oh, money doesn't always win," but statistically, money almost always does win. And incumbents have a big advantage in raising money because they can give the rewards, and so that's always a big advantage. The entrenched incumbents is a real problem, and then even good people going into the system who want to do good things in Congress are stymied because we have a structural, systemic problem of the power of money to prevent the delivery of what the American people are looking for from our Congress. So you have exactly that problem. 14% is, you wonder what the 14% are thinking, because most Americans are not getting what we would expect out of our representative government in Congress. And yet, because it's a battle of money, and the parties, both parties, are using super PACs and dark money channels. You're even getting foreign money now coming in to elections. There is a great power to be reelected, and the further up you go, the more control over the money you get, in terms of seniority and committee assignments and things like that. The money just completely has corrupted this process. And that's the big divide of what Americans see in terms of how the Congress is performing, and yet what happens on election day.
The people, I mean, it's just astonishing, staggering to me that there are other countries, democratic systems that won't allow the money in. So you write about corruption being normalized. So let's just go over some of the things. Donors getting government jobs, tax breaks for billionaires, laws drafted by lobbyists, just turn the whole law over to the lobbyists, and then they try to put it in the Congressional Register. Do you think Americans don't get it? They don't understand, or they're underestimating how money is shaping the laws that govern them? Or do you think they're starting to get it? Or do you think they're still relatively uninformed?
I think Americans get it. I've been blessed, Anthony, to be all over this country this past 10 years since we launched American Promise. I've been in probably every state. I've talked to Americans across the political spectrum. They come out and they vote for this. We have volunteers standing in the snow, getting signatures on clipboards. They come for lobby days. Americans really get that our political system is not going to be able to deliver unless we change how it is funded. And I think the biggest enemy that we have is cynicism and our sense that we're powerless, that an amendment, if it's going to take a constitutional amendment, that's too hard, or we're too divided, And I got to tell you, I was talking to a Republican in Texas who looked at our map of the 23 states on board, and he sees our, states like New York or California. He says, "Wow, you're getting the Democrats. I can't believe they're going to support this." And then we talk to the Democrats and they see, Utah and the Wyoming Senate and strength in Texas and West Virginia on board. And they're saying, "Wow, you're getting Republicans." So we have to get over the idea that we're too divided to do big things. Our political system can't always deliver that. But when we work together, like on this constitutional amendment we're doing, we over and over again show that we can deliver states red or blue, doesn't matter, and we can get the votes in Congress. So I think we need to trust ourselves that we actually have more power than we think, because I think that is what we're most cynical about is the question of whether we have the power or whether we're too hopelessly divided that we just can't get this done. So I hope people will get in this. They'll see what we can do, and we'll really be able to pull this off.
What would be in the amendment? Like, what would be the steel trap that would prevent the money influence? What would be the idea?
Well, there's no steel trap that will, this isn't like, waving a magic wand and everything's fixed. But the constitutional language is really solid. It fits on a napkin. I'm holding it and show you right here. It's really tight, like all good constitutional language. And it's about power and who has it. That's what the Constitution does. It is not a campaign policy law of, 1,000 pages. It's very simple. It moves the power to the American people, to our state legislators, to our Congress, to our local legislatures, to pass effective rules, if they choose, about how money is used in the political system. That's the simple version. It's 3 short sections. And what that does is give us the power to do it. The reason it's not a magic wand is because we'll have to do it. But the judicial overreach, the courts striking down our anti-corruption laws over and over again, that will be over. We will have anti-corruption laws. We will stop foreign money. Up in Maine, that 86% of the voters passed a law saying foreign governments cannot spend money in Maine's elections. It seems like a no-brainer. the courts, federal courts struck that down under Citizens United, that law would stand after this amendment. So, people might think like, oh, we won't be able to pass laws. But that's not true. We keep passing them. We have always done it before, and we've always had limits and anti-corruption laws until this judicial overreach, and we'll do it again. So that's what the amendment does. It gives us the ability to do it, but we're going to have to do it as a democracy, not only now, but 50 years from now, 100 years from now. That's what this constitutional change is so important for. It gives us a chance.
Well, you're an incredible patriot to have this sort of a vision. So let me ask you a visionary question. If the amendment were to pass, and let's pray that it does, what would politics look like in the United States 10 years from now, in your opinion?
Well, it would look very different in the sense it would be representative again. We'd have competitive elections. We'd have a lot of debates. I'm from Boston. I know you're from New York. It's politics ain't beanbag in either place. It's not like we turn into angels. We turn
Well,
into
given the Yankee defeat last night, I almost canceled the podcast on you, but I decided, what am I going to do?
yeah.
These
It's nice.
Bostonians.
I'll just say, nice to see the Red Sox winning. But it's not over yet, as you know. So
No, I mean, these are two tough teams, by the way. But what a great pitching contest last night.
yeah, really good to
I
see.
mean,
But
give me some hope. Give me some hope for my fellow citizens, because to me, and I think you've heard me say this, is how we got together. I want to end Citizens United, pass a constitutional amendment like this. I also think we need to end the gerrymandering. Actually, I think that's another big disaster for the country. But give me some
yeah.
hope. What's the vision?
Well, and this is the hope. Look, when we do constitutional amendments in this country, we do them in bunches. So, we did 4 amendments between 1960 and 1971. We did 4 amendments between 1910 and 1920. Those were periods a lot like our own. The wheels were coming off in this country both times. The American people rallied. We didn't just do amendments. We passed a whole bunch of laws too. And so usually it is more than one thing. And we definitely have more than one thing we got to fix in this country, including gerrymandering. So we get the 4-hour freedom amendment across the finish line, and I think we will in the next few years. We'll then start passing anti-corruption laws. We'll take on gerrymandering. The politics will be realigned. It'll be more responsive to the people, and we will see again and again. The vision doesn't come from me. It comes from what I see in the American people. And you look historically, we always go about every 50 years into these periods where it just seems like the country is going to fall apart, and Americans rally and we pull it together and we come out the other side. But we never have done it without constitutional change and new constitutional rules and new political alignments. And I think that's what we're going to see in the next decade. And that's the hope that we can actually turn into reality.
Well, I want to help you raise your profile on this. I certainly want to help you make this a reality. And this is types of things that we have to do in America. We have 27 amendments to a 236-year-old document. So as you're pointing out, that would mean an amendment once every 8 or so years, yet we've had no amendments since 1993. And that was a procedural one. We both know the real big amendment happened 59 years ago, which is the Civil Rights Amendment. So we are long overdue for these amendments, but this is the sclerosis now in this sort of very tight duopoly where these ancient leaders just want to sit at the top of this political structure and do very little for the American people and do a lot for themselves in terms of their self-service. It's almost like we had public servants, now we have public self-servants, It's a little bit of a bummer, but okay, so we're down to the 5 words. I went through your writings with my staff. I'm going to give you a word. I want you to give me a 1 or 2 sentence reaction to the word. Ready? So I say the word freedom. You say what?
America.
Okay. I say the word trust.
Rebuild.
Okay.
Renew.
Yeah, we gotta re-engineer, recreate, right?
Yeah.
What about the word corruption? You hear the word corruption?
Yeah, I'd have to say our American political system right now, and it's systemic.
Yeah, it needs to be changed, right?
everywhere.
I think everyone
Absolutely.
looks at it. Something's really wrong. System's rotten. Even if the politicians don't want to face it, the American people have, right?
Yeah, it's pervasive.
Lincoln once said something. They were arguing over whether or not the Americans were smart, and Lincoln once said, "Yeah,
You guys may not think they're smart, but they've got a good nose. They can smell a rotting cadaver in their basement. Was one of his lines. And boy, there's something really rotting right now. I say the word revolution. You say what?
I would like to say peaceful. I think the amendment process is how we do peaceful revolution. But if you don't respond to the constitutional obstruction to freedom, revolution is, as Thomas Jefferson said, that's the ultimate right of the people. And I think I would like very much to respond peaceful revolution. And
Right. Well, that's the whole discourse. That's the whole reason for this sort of discourse. That was the whole thought behind the Constitutional Convention and the Federalist Papers, that politics, Dick Gephardt used to say to me, you know why we have politics? We don't have a war. We're beating each other's brains out, You have the ugliness of politics and the verbal abuse we give each other to save ourselves from physical violence. So I'm with you on that. Okay, I'm going to say the last word, but I'm going to give you the last word. I say the word future. What do you think about?
Well, I think about a lot of things. I think uncertain. We can't predict the future. I think there's reason to be concerned about some of the threats of various kinds. But in the end, I think it is in our hands in a lot of ways to make a contribution to it, to do what we can where we are. And I think of my kids and my granddaughter, and I know neither you nor I will be here in the future at some point. And what I'd
Speak
like
for yourself, Clemens. I'm planning on living for 200. Okay,
well, that's good.
I'm like Chuck Grassley. Chuck Grassley's been in the Congress for the last 600 years. Okay, speak for yourself, Clemens.
I wish you luck, but I think we have an obligation not only to the past and what Americans did before that we benefit from, but we got to lay some stuff down for you and all those other people who will be here in 200 years.
I'm very grateful to the work that you're doing and the dedication, and I'd like to figure out a way to do more with you and perhaps get you over to our conference business and see if we can raise awareness. But this, ladies and gentlemen, you're hearing from Jeff Clement. He's the CEO, founder of American Promise. And hopefully we'll be back. We'll have you back on the show when we get this amendment passed. We can talk about the positive ramifications of that. But thank you so much for joining our podcast, Open Book, today.
Anthony, thank you so much. Love what you do and appreciate the opportunity to be here.